I put down some notes for reflection, and I would like to use the last few minutes now to take that space for reflection with you, and maybe invite you to take some scribbles as well. I've learned a lot about listening, hearing, and observing, and appreciating the differences of experiences, the differences of outcomes of those experiences. We all have a variety of journeys that we've traveled through life, that we've traveled through our professional careers, and they made us the people who we are now. And my experiences have been very different to those of Rejoice. And what I've learned over the past couple of years or so is that actually the beauty of making meaning of something that I've just learned or experienced together with someone else who has a different viewpoint, a different journey to that point, helps me to make sense, helps me to have a richness, helps me to challenge myself and my perceptions. So I would like to share some of my nuggets of wisdom with you briefly before I hand over to Rejoice, who will share hers and her perspective of nuggets of wisdom. And I think for me, it started off with a phrase around leadership of equality. And I would like to encourage you all to take that invitation forward. Leadership of equality for me probably still needs a little bit of time to really digest and find out what it means. But actually, we don't need to all be the same. We don't need to be equal, but we want to achieve equality. That social justice theme that Julia and David just referred to resonated there for me. The necessity of change and the necessity to change cultural paradigms, that really came through. I think the people who are on this call are here because you are leaders and you acknowledge that there's been change, but also acknowledge that there has to be change. We can probably, if you're a social worker, put hand on heart and say, not everything that the government does at the moment is actually aligning to your values as a social worker, probably isn't even aligning with social work England standards if we're just thinking about human rights, for example, and some of the migration or immigration policies that are being put forward. But probably, again, because I'm a social worker, I have this notion of hope within me, and that with hope I can achieve change. I have an element of control for my own decisions, for my own actions. And I'm quite aware that we are approaching the new year. We're approaching that period of reflection over Christmas and New Year. And I will do some thinking how I can take some of the learnings from today forward over that period. And with that, I'll probably hand over to Rejoice and want to hear what you think, what you're taking away from today.
Thank you, Tilia. I think for me, what really stuck out is that there's an appreciation even in the room of diversities. And I would like to start off with a comment that was posted when we were having a discussion, and someone posed a question and said, we also need to look into the mental well-being or the state of men, because I think our emphasis was on women. And why we focused on women was particularly because we're reflecting on the experiences of the people that were on the course. But we also understand that gender is diverse. So men are also quite important in this work, but we were only speaking to what came across to us, and also just acknowledging that whilst in the social care and health sectors, it's a majority of women. And there comes issues and layers that are within issues of shame, issues of blaming that has come strongly and add to the mental well-being and challenges of people, whether in leadership or people working under those difficult circumstances that we thought to highlight. And with that, it links for me to the next issues that really resonated with me that was coming across from the whole conference. The first thing was the issue about seeing the person in the environment. I think David touched on it in the panel, the last panel that came out. And I think that's what's coming out for me in it, tying all the things that we saw in the raw unit. The moment that we expressed and we opened a free space where people were seen and heard in their environment and not judged, things came out. I think Rachel also touched on it in the appreciative inquiry to say some people were saying that they felt invisible in their teams. I think it also touched with what ETL was talking about, international social workers or nurses coming into the health and care sector and feeling invisible, being made to be invisible. And that's an experience that women also face in general, where they're silenced and made to be invisible. So I think for me, in terms of leadership, if there's something that we can bring out, is to draw those who are invisible. And because for us to have meaningful diversity is to recognize that sometimes our stances can shut out others, whether it's their voices, whether it's their presence, by acknowledging or dismissing their views. And that removes the place of safety that we're talking about. And once everyone is made to feel visible, to be heard, to be understood, the change process becomes much easier. And also, once you draw them out of that shell, it's easier for them to know and learn and appreciate the different cultures of work that they are embedded in. So that really came out to me. And how do we do that? I think a lot of discussions were around theories were being shared across from different leadership theories, from the different things that we heard from Orlando right through to the last speakers. And I think what stood out for me is just simple: talk to people. That's how you know about them. Do not silence different opinions. Do not silence different views. Do not silence differences because it feels threatening. I think the last panel talked about being vulnerable as a leader, being vulnerable to some truths, because in the leadership position, you're not only getting a job done. How do you bring your team with you? I think Orlando touched on that. How do you bring your team to do that change? Because you need that team. It's by listening, making them feel heard, safe. I think safety kept on coming across. And how do people feel safe is when their voices are heard, when they're validated. There was a lot of validation, and that came up to talk. And I think Rachel touched on it when they were talking about appreciative inquiry, not being judgmental, but allowing people even to make mistakes, knowing that they are in a stressful environment, resource-limited environment. And the last thing, apart from talking, you can also observe. Some people are not talkers. I take myself to be one, but I've heard brilliant colleagues that have observed and drawn me out of my shell. And it's also then that you feel, okay, they are noticing and I can be safe and I can be myself in this space. Because whilst they are quiet doesn't mean that they don't have anything to add. It might be they're struggling to adjust and adapt, which was a case of myself as an international staff as well. So having colleagues that are curious, we spoke about having professional curiosity. So how do you feed that curiosity? By observing, by also talking to the people. So I think to me, those are the nuggets that I took out of the conference. Thank you, Tilia. Back to you.
Thank you, Joyce. And I think that is probably the most poignant way to finish our little conference. Talk to the people, connect. We can only make connections by reaching out, but also answering back if someone gives us a little prod and wants to come in and connect with us. I will take away that picture that Ishia put in her slides of the different colored strands that make the robe so much stronger. And with that, I'll say goodbye and thank all my panelists, all my speakers so much for coming to join into this conference, to make it happen. And I wish you all a wonderful festive period